Yep, okay. Hello everybody, welcome to the Corporate Performance Delivery and Scrutiny Board. Can we start with the attendance apologies? We've got some apologies here, there's nothing else I don't think to add, is there? Okay, minutes of previous meetings. Neither myself nor the chief were here at the last meeting, so if I'll go through the minutes with somebody who was here could raise good comment on them, that would be helpful. So if we could start with page 1. Page 4.
I was here.
You were here, is that right? Thank you. Page 2.
All correct. Yeah.
Page 3.
Same again.
Page 4. Well, I've got something that is a matter arising, which I don't. On the action log. Yes, page 4. Sorry, it all runs into. Yeah. So on page 4, on the action log, has anybody got any comments on that?
Well, you can probably speak better than I can, Commissioner, but 120, I think the APCC is still reviewing their fundamental structure.
They are.
So that's no progress.
No. We've got a general meeting coming up where I think there will be progress, but at the moment there isn't. Jenni, just on 1, 2, 3. Yeah, you knew I was going to ask about that, didn't you?
Yes.
The penetration testing that was being done for eSIM, has that been agreed?
Not as yet. I haven't had a chance to catch up with Tim in relation to it.
Right.
But I will do.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay, because if you remember, we had a bit of correspondence about that, so that would be great if we could. Could you update us outside of this meeting?
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you very much. Page 5.
Just that's accurate, and Lisa would move to that forward.
In relation to action 136 share, I don't think there's any work outstanding in relation to that. It's concerned partnership arrangements around the vulnerability assessment team. ACC Women is now leading that piece of work. I'm not aware of any outstanding issues to require action to be kept open.
Okay, so we can close that then.
Yes.
139 is on the agenda today, so that can be closed after today. Don't think there's anything else there. I just page 6.
Sorry, it might just be you're probably aware that the policing minister is coming to York to look at the mental health work that's being done, just linked to item 145, and spoke to the chief nurse and various other things, so it was quite positive.
It was quite interesting. Spent a good hour and a half. The course controller was spoke to the lead nurse and also members of staff in the FCR. What's really quite complimentary.
Good.
Can we close that one now?
Yeah, I was just going to ask Jenni on that one. So they can talk to both the officers and the individuals, but is it happening?
They can be
is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It always was actually.
Yes, it
Right.
always was. That was a miscommunication.
Right. Okay. Good. Okay. So we can close that then. Good. Anything else on page 6?
Just the inspection activity, we've currently got HY in yet again, this time around effectiveness. There's a strategic briefing yesterday, and we're just doing a factual accuracy check for the efficiency assessment that's come in. May.
You've got harassment coming up.
It's part of the
Vulnerability. Yes.
Yes. Is that that's imminent, isn't it? Is it?
It's taking place this week.
Yes, exactly.
So effectiveness is taking place this week. We've got the draft efficiency report, which we're just checking on, and on Thursday this week, expecting the draft reports on legitimacy and leadership as well.
Okay. Thank you. On the youth commission and strategy, I'm wondering whether we can just amalgamate those two actions and have an action to come back here with an update on that when it's ready. Would that be all
We've got
right?
some brief updates for today,
Yeah,
but we can come back further and do a more detailed update
Yeah.
if required.
yeah, that'd be helpful. So Jenny, when are you planning to do those brief updates?
So we've got them as part of the today's presentation, some brief updates around the strategy and the Youth Commission. But if you want something more detailed, we could come back separately and do that.
Yeah, I think it would be good to do that. Yeah, because
Should we talk to Maria about scheduling that in?
yes. So I think it might be good to do a bit of a sort of a deep dive around that. Not just look at the work, the activities that are going on, but looking at what we're getting out of those activities, so the outcomes and all the rest of it. So I think it would be good to do that around young people.
Some more detail around the recommendations and how we might have taken those forward from last time.
Yeah, and obviously there are some high level goals that we're trying to achieve. So how are we, what are we doing in relation to meeting those goals? And are we seeing anything concrete that might suggest that we are getting anywhere near them? Okay. 7, on page 7.
Yes, Chair. I've received a good update. Fortunately, apologies, we didn't actually make it in terms of actions 165, 166 and 167. ACC this morning has reported for 165 that themes emerged through the operations support about reductions in non-dwelling burglaries, and this has been a focus on known offenders, rural task force activity and changing nature of crime, for example, cybercrime. And more analysis has been commissioned through the Intelligence Department and will be provided at a later date when that's been completed. For 166,
I can give just a further update, to be honest. We've done that piece of work. We've done that piece of work and it shows that the reductions are both across the urban and the rural areas, rather than just the rural areas. But we do think that when we've assessed the activity over the summer months, it's been that proactivity that's resulted in offenders not coming into North Yorkshire Police across our borders, which is where predominantly our burglary offences from.
Good. At some point it'd be nice to see a little bit more detail behind that, if that's possible. To see this sort of, because we did have a discussion about cross-border crime before, didn't we? So
we're not able to specifically link it to a reduction in cross-border crime we've commissioned an initial piece of work that shows it's across both rural and urban areas. It shows the reductions across the piece over the summer months. We're able to say that we've had quite a lot of successes with the operations that we've had. To commission more work would take analysts away from practically looking at the things that are now in trade that are causing us increases in crime.
So, Paul, there's also the linking with the ANPR investment as well.
Absolutely.
So
yeah, I think it's a tried piece of work between Roads Crime Team, the Rural Task Force, but also ANPR, and we've got numerous operations that are actually listed in this month's performance pack that demonstrate that.
I know, but if we're looking at the payback on the investment from the ANPR, which was quite a significant amount of money, it'd be interesting to understand in a little bit more detail how that investment is resulting in the great outcomes that you're talking about. So we had a discussion earlier on about looking at past decisions and making sure that we're sort of ensuring that things have been delivered properly and they are starting to deliver the results that we anticipated when we made those decisions. So I think it would be good to try and link that into the ANPR decision at some point in the future.
Yes, and that work is ongoing, Commissioner. To touch upon it in the last meeting, to build a performance framework around the use of ANPR so we can see how effective it is. And I'm also linking that into the national work as well, so all police forces can show how effective the use of ANPR data is as well. The data is there, we can report back to show how much value we're getting from ANPR, both in terms of qualitative numbers, but also perhaps some case studies as well where ANPR has been shown seems to be effective.
Yeah, so it's looking at whether we've got a good return on that investment, and also not just looking at it specifically around the ANPR, but the wider threat around cross-border criminality. And because there's some statistics in the report here later that clearly shows that some of our neighbouring forces, their crime rates are quite high now, even higher than they were. and that obviously impacts on us. So if there is a success story here that we've got, it'd be really good to be able to sort of look at that in a little bit more detail and understand it.
Commissioner, I'm just thinking, if you don't mind, for members of the public, listen to ANPR, automatic number plate recognition.
Yeah, thanks.
Right at the top, 155, that was because, Tricia, I think you've got plan, well, sort of developed plans about online safety for children and giving parents confidence and children to be able to talk to their children about it. That's not what Louise was doing with that particular campaign, so I did link it, but they weren't related. So we just make sure we weren't taking anything.
Thank you.
That can close therefore.
And Sharon, it's coming back to 166 and 167 about some of the terminology that's used. Again, ACC has reported that they're looking at performance information, performance data and how that's presented. So that's part of an overall review. That's in relation to both the language in 166 and outcome-based performance in 167 as well.
Okay.
At 156, which is about community speed watch, just an update. Operator colleagues might be able to have more information than me, but I know schemes are now offering Harrogate, Pamela and Burn Bridge. I don't know if that's 2 schemes or one big scheme, but certainly the first one is now running and active and doing what it was set up to do.
That's good. I still would like, we'll look at on the detail of some of that outside of this meeting, because we've had some very high level numbers but not a detailed. I'd like to see a sort of more detailed review of how that is going, what some of the barriers are to its expansion. Yeah.
There's a
It wants more.
So, Commissioner, this week the coordinator has actually started work for Community Speed Watch. So I think there's some traction given to that over weeks and months to come.
Okay, because I know it's been a little bit slow in absence of that post. So
yes, there's no dedicated person in post to work on that. So.
Okay, all right. That'd be. I mean, maybe the thing to do is to let that person get their feet under the desk for a few months and then revisit it at that point.
That person's working for Leanne Conley, head of criminal justice, so it's in the traffic bureau.
I was just thinking that one of the things that I'm impressed with my ANPR and Community Speed Watch is you need to kind of let them kind of bed in, and then we normally have a business benefits process. So I think it might be useful to make sure that you decide on when they're due to land. They have to every certain amount of time, aren't they? So we're all very keen to see these things kind of get in and be successful, but we need to give a chance to kind of, and then do an objective assessment of whether or not we're getting what we said we were going to get in the first place. Is that a built-in process?
It is.
Have I got that right?
Usually 6 months after implementation, then the business benefits review is undertaken.
Right. Okay. So then, what I'd like to do outside of this meeting then is sit down and have a look at some of those programs that we have made investments in, and then just look at those ones that we might want to bring forward to this to discuss. Yeah. That makes it a little bit less ad hoc and a little bit more planned, which would be good, wouldn't it? Okay. Right.
Can I just do a quick update on 164? DCC asked me to look at the breakdown of self-referrals and other referrals into supporting victims, just to look at the categories of crime. We had, out of the 349 self and other referrals over the last 6 months of this financial year, we've had 114 for fraud referrals, 78 violence, 30 theft, 23 sexual and 22 domestic. Those were the kind of key categories of self-referrals and other agency referrals into supporting victims. I think DCC was concerned that it might be around sexual offences where victims didn't want to come to the force, but there is a clear mix of self and other agency referrals in that.
So that's a better picture than we've seen in the past, haven't we? So that is good.
It is, yeah, there's a significant increase in self-referrals and other agency referrals, hopefully from the work that we've been doing to promote supporting victims. not so much traffic coming through the website, but definitely people coming through the telephone.
Okay, great.
Do you know what the split is between self-referral and other agency?
So it's probably about 30%, 60% in terms of those numbers. So yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
On Ward 6. No, we're there now. On 168, I've been doing some work with HR and we're hopeful that not the version of the forms for this meeting because of the way timescales work, but perhaps the next meeting we can try and present it figures in a way that would be a bit more meaningful.
The Commissioner Chief might know the background to that. That's the way, in the HR part of the update, there was a sort of tracking of number of officers employed. And with 1400s, the target the whole way, but that's never particularly realistic because of retirements and all those sorts of things, it goes up and down. There was confusion about how to explain that to the public, that it's never just a static 1400, it goes up and down and sort of due to lots of different reasons. So can we display that in a better, more sort of transparent manner?
Yeah, and I think it was even for the internal audit. So some of the issues that came up at the affordability board and the discussion about a mindset that uses this as an absolute for every month rather than some aspirational longer term target.
Okay. Thank you. Paul.
Yeah. To be a three-way act, if you don't mind, between Jenni, Richard and myself.
Oh, sorry. We haven't had any questions from the public. Sorry, we haven't had any.
No, not really.
No. Okay.
Okay. So we've got several slides to talk through, which we're going to give a fairly brief overview, but obviously we'll pause for any questions, Chair, which you may have. So starting first of all with the first set of slides. This explains 12 outcomes related to operational delivery. We last reported on at this time last year, 2015. The majority of these deliverables, which are shown on the first slide, have actually been reported on throughout the course of the year, and I will touch on some of those in the coming slides. But first of all, as an overview, compare North Yorkshire to...
Paul, can I just, sorry, on that first slide, I think there's a mistake in the two middle boxes on the left-hand side are the same.
Okay.
So there might be one missing.
I'm sure there is one missing there. It's probably
Right.
a time.
Okay, alright, sorry.
One's got victims in. They are slightly different.
Are they?
One's about stopping crime, one's about becoming victims of crime.
I should check it, shouldn't I confess that I haven't noticed.
I did read them about
One's
3
about-
times.
One of them's about becoming a victim, one's about the likelihood of them committing. So one's a preventive and one's a yin and yang.
There we go. Thank you.
The data on the next slide relates to the period ending March 2016 and compares North Yorkshire with other police forces across the UK in terms of crimes per 1,000 population. You can see that North Yorkshire compares quite favourably. Time has passed, and whilst the figures have yet to be verified, the position more recently has improved than what appears in that slide there.
Paul, just so that this is because these are the last fully audited yearly figures, isn't it? Which is why it's March.
That's correct. So
We do get them updated on a regular basis, where my understanding is North Yorkshire is now ahead of Devon and Cornwall as the safest.
Yes, that's right. So the figures go into the end of August. Whilst yet to be verified, North Yorkshire is now second in that list, which makes it the safest county in England.
And do we know if our neighbours in West Yorkshire will improve in any way?
I could not possibly comment on that.
Just checking.
I think the wider difference, however, is that this is a stark demonstration of the fact that we are surrounded by much higher crime rates. So the point about borders is important.
Cleveland, Humberside and South Yorkshire, 1, 2, 3, 4. 3 of the bottom 6 are some of our neighbours.
And then Lancashire's just not far behind either. So.
But ultimately, Chair, it portrays a very favourable position in terms of the safety in the county. This next slide discusses conviction rates around offences of vulnerability. You can see as you scan down the figures there for domestic abuse, the conviction rate is strong, but there's above the level of ambition. The same is said for rape. In terms of hate crime, whilst the figure there, 83.9% conviction rate, is below ambition, there's actually seen an increase in conviction rate compared to the previous year.
Sorry, Paul, just for the benefit of the public, that level of ambition is set by the Crown Prosecution Service.
That's correct. So
it's not set by us.
So I think there's some really good work here that's been done. I think, particularly around the conviction rates for domestic abuse, I think have been very high and very successful. But I think this chart masks the real problem here, which is reporting. It's not necessarily the conviction rates; it's the levels of reporting. And I'm wondering whether there is a way in which we can start to look at how we improve the levels of reporting, and that accompanies the data on conviction rates, so that we can start to see not only are we getting greater conviction rates, but we're actually being able to support more victims who might not currently be getting the service because they're not coming forward.
Yeah, I think it's something around the way in which some of this data is presented. This is from a criminal justice, so you've had to have entered the criminal justice process for these figures to kick in. You've then got the ones which are reported to us from a crime perspective, which has shown an increase. And then you've got the ones clearly that people still don't feel comfortable or make the personal choice not to come forward to the police service. So it's that life journey, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've got very low rates per head of population in the stats for domestic abuse. I question whether that is really the case, and actually whether there are other things going on in our communities that might mean it's difficult for people to report. So through other channels we're looking at those type of issues, but I think we've got a real. So it's really good to see the self-reporting to supporting victims coming through, because that's indicative that the message might be getting through. So I'd really like to see how we're encouraging people to report more, and then it links in with Jenni's work and the commissioning work as to actually what other channels are there where people could get support, etc., etc.
I was just going to say that the supporting victims is only part of the picture as well, because there are also self-referrals into IDACs. Is running the service, which again we could bring forward as part of that reporting as well. And because we've had an increase from 4 is that it was in the county to 14 now over the last 18 months. We've got significant amount of support service that wasn't there previously, which will be reaching more people.
And whilst it doesn't answer your question fully, Chair, we've also carried out a peer review on domestic abuse with Constable as well, to see what lessons we can learn from another neighbouring force who perform well in this area. We've also carried out our own internal audit through our Nexus team. Nexus focuses on improved service delivery, and that's also looked at how we can improve reporting for domestic abuse as well. I'll link into Jenni's point about additional resources around etc. So our own investment in resources into investigation of offensive vulnerability, including domestic abuse as well.
So is there somebody gathering all of that and coming forward with a sort of strategy to look at how we can increase reporting levels?
Yes, it will be. That's reflected in the domestic abuse action plan, which has been enhanced through the peer review and through the work of Nexus as well. That domestic abuse action plan is managed through our vulnerability board, and that does touch upon the issues of reporting as well. Right. Okay. So I'd really like to see what the plans are for increasing reporting. That it's not just around NYP, but Jenni, it's around your activity and the work that partners are doing as well. Because I know IDAS has been doing a lot of work on it. So it's trying to link all of those things together to look at what we think we should be doing. And then through the National Rural Crime Network, we're looking at barriers to reporting in rural areas as well. So it's very difficult to access services, for example, in rural areas. That might be one of the barriers that exists. So I'd like to try and bring this together into something that is quite comprehensive.
It may help. I mean, the domestic action plan that we have to generate is then moderated through the National Domestic Abuse Plan that has ministerial oversight, and that then leads into all the multiple partnerships that are involved in this area of business. So there's probably some good practice in there as well that we might want to make sure we pick up on.
There's actually in existence a whole series of action plans from the Home Office, the NPCC, specialist review, as well as our own internal audit, and we've pulled all those together into one holistic action plan for domestic abuse as well, which we can report back on. In fact, we have reported back on the previous corporate performance meetings.
So can I ask Jenny, can you pick that up with Paul and we can have a look at that and see where we are? Because it also links into some of my earlier comments around our ability to sort of market services as well.
Just briefly mention that last year we had the domestic abuse self-referral service that IDAS delivered for us, which was about raising awareness within rural areas, particularly around the services that we offer as North Yorkshire Police and Police and Crime Commission's office. We've agreed to fund a role within IDAS this financial year, which is a community outreach engagement officer, which, if not already, I'll make sure is linked in with that kind of action plan so that we can link up commission services resources with kind of force resources to make sure we're getting the maximum impact from that role.
Thank you.
So the next slide relates to the theme of children and young people. The theme of children and young people. So the first point there is the children and young people strategy, which is launched in 2015. This is on the slide and our 4 high-level priorities under the strategy. And that strategy is coming to an end currently. And then Jenni and I and others are working on a revised strategy moving forward, incorporating the Youth Commission. So currently where we're at with the current youth strategy is Inspector Rogerson's doing an audit with other managing leaders within North Yorkshire Police to update our delivery plan that we've got sitting underneath the strategy. And then as you identified earlier at the Commission, there was more in-depth discussion about a future board, so we can do that to
that'd be great.
Future policy.
Yeah.
Okay. In terms of the Safer Schools Partnership, that started off with 2 schools back in September 2015, and those were Graham School in Scarborough and York High School. Essentially, Safer Schools Partnership is a partnership initiative between the police and the local school aimed at reducing things like antisocial behaviour, bullying, truancy, and school issues that may be prevalent within that school and in the surrounding community. We did a piece of work to identify the appropriate schools, and those 2 schools were chosen. We've done an interim review on how we're progressing with that. The feedback from the schools is very good. They really enjoy having presence in the police and some benefit from them. They've seen a noticeable change in behaviour, truancy, and all those things that are on earlier. What I've asked to do, however, is to get more of a grip around it in terms of rolling out further to other schools, so as we begin to develop our own policing model to consider the further benefits of having further schools involved. Our model within North Yorkshire Police involves police community support officers rather than police officers working alongside the schools. Okay. In terms of the next bullet points on there, which is Crucial Crew. Crucial Crew have been running now for a number of years in North Yorkshire Police, and over the course of this year, 8,700 Year 6 pupils provided a day's input from both police and other agencies around a wide variety of community safety topics. I suppose the success for this year was that York and Selby have now received that input, whereas in previous years they weren't involved. To improve the system, we've got partners on board in terms of the steering group. We're linking it with some of the prices for North Yorkshire Police. I had the benefit of going to one of the sessions earlier on this year, and I think some of the other chief officers may have gone to them. And I have to say I was quite inspired by the impact that it had on young people and the feedback from young people talking to the teachers themselves. In terms of our strategy moving forward, that's one of the points for discussion, I think, in terms of our revised youth strategy.
How are young people involved in developing the programme at Crucial Crew?
Well, that's one of the things we've been thinking about as regards to Youth Commission, because we recognise that we've been talking to partners, county and city, and councils, but I think one of the opportunities given the Youth Commission is that we can involve them.
They're older, aren't they, the Youth Commission, because Crucial Crew is Year 6, so they're much younger children.
Yeah.
Whereas
what we do have is we have feedback sheets from the schools, so feedback from the pupils and from the teachers, and they're fed back into the steering group in terms of the planning.
it would be good to see a more sort of structured programme around how young people could be involved in it. to help them sort of co-design it would be really interesting to see, because that's the sort of principle of the Youth Commission, isn't it? And at that age group, it's, you know, older, and perhaps reflecting that principle in the younger age group would be quite good.
Thank you. In terms of the next point on there, safeguarding training. We've done an awful lot of safeguarding training. I think we discussed this meeting previously. I suppose a couple of key highlights are that in terms of safeguarding training specifically, we've had one of our key training days dedicated to safeguarding and vulnerability. And as of this month, our PCSOs are going to get similar input as regards safeguarding in line with police officers. The key topics for that will be honour-based violence, modern slavery, human trafficking and hate crime. So there's a good input there in terms of some of the emerging vulnerabilities in force. So that's that. In terms of community safety codes, that's on the end of the slide there. Today we have a joint coordinating group sitting at Athena House involving community safety partnership local delivery teams, which we chair as North Yorkshire Police, and the importance of North Yorkshire Community Safety Partnership. So I'll be able to report back on the success of that in a future meeting. I suppose some tangible developments on that is that this week we launched the Harrogate Hub with Harrogate Borough Council. So that was quite a key milestone really for us in the journey of the hubs. So that brings a suite of community safety hubs to being York, Selby, Harrogate, Crane, Hamilton and Richmondshire.
Craven's not really a proper hub though, is it?
Well, it's a journey.
Yeah. I think it would be a bit of a...
There are different models in place depending on local need. I suppose the point around the community safety hub is getting partners in the room working on the same priority or on the same priorities in a coordinated way, frankly. What we're trying to do to the joint coordinating group is harness the learning from around the county and the city and get where we can a commonality of approach because we're a cross-cutting agency. So that basically will report back to the Community Safety Partnership with the next one, and I can keep people on the same best of how to do this.
So the other thing that I think that this tips into is community safety post, looking at how we can work better with the fire service. So in some of those hubs, we've got a more developed model than we have in other areas with different agencies involved. It'd be very interesting to use the learning that we develop from those hubs to try and look at some of the perhaps wider operational benefits that we might get by closely working with the fire service, and that could feed into the business case that we're developing in relation to the fire service. So I'd be really good, Richard, to try and pick some of that up.
I think you're right, Commissioner. I think in terms of that, we have, for example, the fire service work quite closely with Scarborough, for example.
Yes.
I was at the regional meeting at Wakefield, which was the ambulance service and the fire service, talking about prevention and intervention work that the agencies are doing. And it's clear that some of the other fire services, for example, elsewhere in the region, are doing some areas of activity that we could capture and look at for ourselves. Mr. Madrick's excited on that, and I know he's going to have a strategic meeting for the to discuss some of those areas shortly. So there are, I think you're absolutely right, so the fire service is a key partner. We've started off well, and some of them scope for improvement.
Okay, but what I'm interested in are, if we want to develop a vision of what community service might look like in the future, some of the learning that we've got from the hubs there will help us develop that vision, and looking at not just what's going on in our region, but what's going on in other parts of the country where some of these roles are developing, because there's quite a lot of work going on at the moment. There's also going to be possibilities for funding around this in the short term. So I want to be able to make sure that we're in a position to be able to access some of those opportunities for funding.
Okay. The next slide relates to the Youth Commission, so Jenni and I will be talking about that. In terms of the current the Youth Commission has been in existence now since May of 2015. Last year they set 6 priorities with North Yorkshire Police, and they produced this document here, the Youth Commission and final report, and there was a launch event at the priorities that I know you attended, Commissioner. The priorities that they were set, or that they set rather, were legal highs and drug abuse, cyberbullying and internet safety, hate crime, vulnerable young people, preventing youth crime and relationships with the police. Since that time, the Commissioner has been continually engaged between North Yorkshire Police and the Youth Commission. Where we're at currently with that is we're currently doing an audit with other people in the organisation to give you a further update, which will do a deep dive discussion on this in terms of progress that we've made on those current 6 priorities before we move on in earnest onto the revised 6 new priorities which we will talk about shortly. So as an example, we are involved in the Youth Commission, or have involved in the Commission in a number of events, such as the PCSO conference that we held in July at Shrensell. There was about 160 PCSOs came to that from around the 40, and one of the sessions I was involved in the Youth Commission, and they were able to talk to the PCSOs about their findings, bearing in mind that the PCSOs were really at the forefront of engaging with young people in schools and communities, and that went down really, really well. But there are a number of other tangible benefits from working with the Youth Commission as well. But we can bring that back at a future time to talk to you in more detail about that.
Okay, that would be good. On point 4, abusive relationships.
Sorry, those are the new priorities.
Those are the new.
Those are the new ones which we'll come on to shortly. Yes.
Right.
So
Okay.
the old priorities.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
I have a handout as regards to new priorities. If you can send it out, just
Yeah. Yes. That's.
useful.
Yeah.
Shall I start going through them?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So in terms of the 2016-17 programme, so we've got 37 youth commissioners this financial year. 27 are brand new youth commissioners and 10 are youth commissioners from last financial year who've opted to continue to be youth commissioners this year. They're all between 14 and 25 and we've got full district representation within that group, which was something that we struggled with last financial year. So we've done a lot more around kind of making sure that we've got a diverse range of young people represented in that group. We had a launch event in August where the young people chose 6 new priorities which are documented on the slide. They're very, very similar to the priorities that were identified last year, so there aren't really any surprises in there. There's just slight reforming of words and focus, particularly as you just picked out their Commissioner, the abusive relationships. I don't know whether you wanted to.
Well, I think that's, I suppose I was just thinking about the converse of that, which is healthy relationships. And actually, perhaps that's, obviously we've got to tackle, if there's abusive relationships, we need to tackle those, but actually perhaps we should be helping promote what a healthy relationship should be around sort of early intervention and prevention. And it's just a thought.
Absolutely.
Is that how they describe it?
It is, yeah. So these are kind of areas or priorities that they wanted to focus on. But you're absolutely right, in order to be able to identify an abusive relationship, you need to be able to identify what
You need to understand what a healthy relationship is.
Exactly, yeah. So the research and advisory group, which has been set up with York University to oversee and govern the Youth Commission process, has met twice. They've looked at particularly around publicity with young people and safeguarding as kind of key areas where we wanted to make sure we had a robust approach this financial year. So that's been a really useful process. The Youth Commissioners have gone through peer research training in September, which included input on safeguarding from Katie Hardy from North Yorkshire Police, which went down really well. Members are all going through a low level of vetting before they start consulting with other young people, which we thought was an appropriate development on last financial year to offer a level of assurance that they've been trained appropriately and they're the right people to
Okay, so let me flag something there, because I wouldn't want that to mean that young people who have had troubles in the past can't engage with this programme.
Absolutely, and we've been working with vetting to make sure that that's not the case. And nobody
Please
would be
reassure me
excluded.
that is not the
That
case.
is not the case. Nobody would be excluded. It's just a level of assurance that because they've been working with young people under 16, as young people under 16, that they've gone through an appropriate process to know how to do that, and that we're not putting anybody at risk through that process. That's the only reason we've gone through the vetting approach. I can provide some additional information outside, Commissioner, to give you that level of assurance, but we've absolutely considered that.
It's not traditional vetting.
No, it isn't. It's not a level 1 or 2 or 3 vetting.
I was going to
It's
say,
separate
because
level
there's clearly national protocols about anybody who has access to children of a certain age needs to be ensured we're not
Yes.
the wrong kind of people to be connected to kids.
I'd like some additional reassurance from that, please.
Yeah. No, I will provide that, absolutely. Yeah, it was just something that we were really concerned that we went through, and we didn't want to restrict anybody becoming a youth commissioner, but we wanted to consider anybody who was putting themselves forward and if they were appropriate to undertake the role.
It's the balance, isn't it? It's really,
It really is
if somebody's
challenging.
gone through a really, when we want to help them kind of
Yeah.
learn from those experiences. But by its very nature, people who want access to kids will volunteer for these sorts of roles. So you need to have that balance, making sure that they're not at risk.
It's also a little bit about the age difference, isn't it? It's the older end of the spectrum is quite different, even though there's not many years between it, between the younger end as well.
We'll provide that outside the meeting.
I think we probably both need reassurance on that conversation.
That's understandable. And the next event that we're holding is on the 29th of October. That's to complete the peer research training and to talk about next steps and what happens around the 6 key priorities and how the young people decide what they'll go out and do in the next big conversation. Just to kind of lead on from what Richard mentioned in terms of things that the young people have been involved in so far, the previous youth commissioners have been involved in the Child Sexual Assault Assessment Service evaluation, so we've been part of the focus group for that. They're going to be involved in a stop and search subgroup on the 5th of October, a specials conference on the 9th of October, and hate crime working group on the 10th of October. So they're already getting involved in a number of things that are going on to try and support and influence the way we move forward. So that's really good.
Good. Thank you.
Can I just ask one, which I think is just, how are we going to kind of link this back into the police and crime plan and the control strategies that we have around some of these major areas? So how do we kind of, because I think if I was one of the youth commission, I want to see us kind of reflecting that in some of the way in which we do stuff to make sure we're actually reporting back on it. So how does that link in?
So just to add to the Chief's point, a member of the Youth Commission came to see me, and he was, it's not just about seeing it reflected in strategies and words, it's about actually how does it influence the way that the police deliver the service on the ground to young people. And I think that if young people are going to continue to be engaged in this, with us in this way, which is fantastic, they need to be able to see that their work is making a real positive difference.
So doing the point that you raised, first of all, Commissioner, so yesterday, for example, I had a meeting with my person in the partnership group, and one of the challenges was exactly that of our council. So a tangible example is, short we had to deliver a program called Certificate in Neighbourhood Management, so neighbourhood police training for all our police support officers, PCs and sergeants. So the challenge I've put there is, what's the role and involvement of the Youth Commission in terms of that program? So I think there's a real tangible there. Jumping back on the point the Chief raised there, and that was the link between the police and crime plan, supervisors and forces. So you'd be aware then that we're taking a new approach to looking at that in terms of the moral approach. I think you've had a briefing on that already. So there are clear links there between some of the emerging findings from that, some of the findings from the Youth Commission, and some of the national things coming from the National Police Chiefs Council in terms of their youth strategy. Jenni and I had our first meeting with some of our staff on Friday, trying to get a grip around some of those issues. So we're very conscious and aware that we need to try and bridge those particular aspects.
So this is quite interesting really, because it also then points to how we might, so we're developing quite an interesting programme around engagement with young people, and it then starting to impact in the way that we deliver a service. My challenge then is, what about the IAGs and different groups of people, and how can their input start to change the service in a practical way? So we've had a lot of conversations about the IAGs and whether they're effective or not, and whether they actually really do what they need to do, and perhaps the work that we're doing with young people would then, in a few months' time, give us a bit of understanding of what might be possible with some of the IAGs as well.
Yes, so you're absolutely right. So last week, I think it was, Will and I had a meeting with Chief Inspector Nick Hunter, who leads on our IAG development side and Inspector Newberry's plan. We came away from that meeting reassured that there's some activity in place to develop that approach from IAGs. Today we have a new member of staff starting on inclusion and diversity who have a lot of experience in this field. And Will and I are going to continue to link across with Nick Hunter to see how we can continue to develop the approach to develop that.
Okay.
The next one's me as well. So this will just give you a brief update, because we talked about this a couple of months ago. In terms of the Independent and Victim Advisor Service pilot to track repeat victimisation, we've now analysed 108 cases that went through support services in 2015-16, and the initial analysis, although the deep analysis hasn't taken place as yet, is that the repeat victimisation after support is mainly around antisocial behaviour rather than crime. And the initial analysis suggests that it's around chaotic lifestyles rather than a kind of a targeted approach in terms of repeat victimisation. But we're going to do some further analysis on crime type as well, which we think will bring some more interesting kind of areas of potential work going forward to the table, so we'll do that piece of work. We also need to go through the other services. There's a significant amount of victims accessing services like the service, so it's going to take a considerable amount more time to do repeat victimisation analysis on those, but we're on with that and we'll report back in more detail going forward. In terms of victim satisfaction, we've now run the first stage of our victim satisfaction survey. We've only done that so far with those people who received a telephone call from supporting victims, but didn't go on to receive services, so they were assessed not to need services. So it's only a small proportion of people that we work with at the moment. So there's 364 of those victims over the 3-month period between April to June, and we've surveyed 39, so 10% survey sample. So 56.4% of those victims said that they were very or fairly satisfied with the service they were offered, which seems particularly low, we felt, but on deeper looking at the numbers, the other options were not applicable or they didn't answer, and that was 40% of the service. So when you look at that, actually 56% is quite a significant number of people saying that they were very or fairly satisfied, but we are going to do some more work around that. We are talking about the group that didn't need access to service on the back of an assessment, so the likelihood is that they may well be more dissatisfied for being up and asked if they want to service than others. So we're hoping that the proportion will go up in terms of satisfied for the other groups that go on to receive support services. Of this group, 79.5% rated the introduction that the supported victims team gave about who they are and why they were calling as very good or quite good. So that was, I think, a positive. 79.5% rated the explanation of the support that was available as very good or quite good. And 74.3% said that the support had been offered at the right time, even though they didn't need it. They thought it was the right time in the process for the support to be offered. So that was positive as well. We also found that 25.6% of that group had found out about supporting victims prior to the call through the victim information pack, which I think will increase as time goes on and more of those packs are made available to victims. And 10.2% were aware of supporting victims through another agency before they were called as well. And we're talking about 48 hours after a crime's committed here, so it's quite a short window of time. and 38.4% had been given a victim information pack before supporting victims contacted them as well, which we imagine will go up, but we are again only talking of a short period of time after the crime. So it could be that there are visits scheduled in where a victim information pack will go to a victim after that initial call from supporting victims.
So as a consequence of doing that work, what have you decided needs to be changed?
So some of the things that we're looking at now is around how we analyse who gets a call, because some of the things that we've talked about in terms of being very or fairly satisfied with the fact that who we call is actually these people are assessed not to need a support service. So is there something that we're doing in terms of the assessment of information, which means that more people are going into the pool for a telephone call than need to be? So should we be restricting those that are being called, or looking at another way of assessing who needs a call and who doesn't? That's one of the key things that we're looking at.
So what about what did victims say they felt needed to be changed in order to improve the service?
There is a number of feedback. So some of the areas were around, the key feedback that we got was around contact from the force actually. So it was more information required about their case. So we were able to do that with the 39 individuals who responded, but there wasn't anything specific from those 39 individuals which talks about improvements to that specific service.
But that's consistent then, isn't it, with the findings of the original victim needs assessment, which said that one of the main areas that they felt needed to be improved was communication around the progress of their case. Yeah. And the high levels of kind of the satisfaction in terms of kind of how they rated the contact from the team continued when you ask things about kind of are you confident about the information that you've been providing so far from the police. So there was a continuation of satisfaction about the level of support they received. They just wanted more information, which is challenging.
Sorry, just so clear, what type of information?
I think they wanted updates on their case. So it was, I mean, we are talking about a short time period after the crime here as well. So actually there would be updates that would come after we contacted them.
No, I get that, and entitled to as much information as we give them. It's kind of, but I suppose it's what expectations are we creating around how long it takes us to do certain things, kind of, and when it once it gets into the criminal justice process and all those.
So I think what it might be worth doing is going back and revisiting the original victim needs assessment and looking at some of those key findings that came out of that and assessing what we're doing now against some of those key findings to see if we are making improvements. Because I do remember we had some fairly substantial discussions around how we did that, which I think will be worth revisiting at this point in time. Now that these services are starting to sort of bed in, it will be a good thing to do, I think.
I certainly think there's information in the criminal justice world that you can provide to victims as a kind of average length of time things will take to do, so you manage people's expectations. So you can never say never, but certainly when we've done some pre-bail charge work, we know how long certain types of investigations are taking. So it is just about giving some parameters around, you're not likely to really hear around this till X, Y, Z.
And I think that is some of the information that the supporting victims team are able to provide for people, which does give them a certain level of reassurance. And we have tried to build that into the website as well, so there are pathways for crime types about kind of how long things will take. So that information is there available. We need to make more reference to it and set the right level of expectation for victims. Is that something Katie could look at? Because she's coming to this fresh, and it'd be quite interesting to get a new person's perspective on that original research, the services we've put in place, and sort of an assessment of sort of, where we are on our original goals around trying to improve some of those services. It's not something that I know would happen very quickly, but perhaps over the next 6 months we could look at that. Because if we're then coming up into a sort of commissioning cycle again at some of these services, it then allows us to look at how we sort of continuously develop services. Absolutely, and I think it was one of the things that we wanted to look at before we looked at repeating victim needs analysis as to how far we got with some of the things that came through in terms of first, and as to whether it was appropriate to do another victim needs analysis if we hadn't focused on improving some of the things that were pointed out by victims as being areas of concern.
And so we also knew through that process that there were issues with data and all of that sort of stuff, that supporting victim teams have experienced a whole range of issues in relation to data, you know, which you know, because of the complexity of various things is quite difficult to deal with, but you know, it allows us to try and sort of look at how we can smooth some of this out.
And already the figures are showing that because of the additional work that the force control and slaughtering victims team are doing together, more victims being contacted. Because previously that work didn't necessarily take place between victim support and force control in terms of identifying additional information about how to contact a victim. So now more of that's taking place and more victims are being contacted.
So this also feeds into some of the work in the local criminal justice board and how we, and that the subgroup there, so I think we can pick it up there as well. Yeah, okay.
Chair, of course, most of the deliverables were set out in the early part of the presentation, and there are several slides left, but perhaps deal with those by way of exception.
Yeah.
You've got just for the sake of management of time. We have reported on some of these in past meetings, and be familiar with the content of those slides.
So the only thing that I suppose I would say generally, and is to understand. So, for example, with the road safety stuff, you know, how is this activity relating to outcomes? So we've got a list of what people are doing, so what impact are those things having? And it would be helpful in future presentations to focus on that as opposed to the list of activities.
It may well be that people have assumed that, because obviously it's reported in a different format, but if you're doing a deep dive around some of this stuff, you need to include the latest performance statistics as well, which is a little bit more encouraging than happened in the last few years. But you're right, it was a conversation we had this morning, wasn't it, around making sure that the investments getting a return.
I think we can take that feedback back in the team that help prepare the slides, more focus on outcomes and just perhaps shift the emphasis out there.
Yeah, the emphasis on the slides needs shifting to what actually we're achievements and doing, and actually if there's any gaps or issues that we need to collectively discuss.
Sure.
Would it be helpful on that then if we specify what that format would look like, just to help people who ultimately do the presentation?
Certainly, I mean, when Caroline and James are working with colleagues from the quality monthly outcomes, we're trying to follow the business plan, so you know all of that's information in the so it's possible we can certainly look at how that's presented.
So, I mean, an example, when at the top of the header, is we know that we've seen an increase in drink driving. So, you know, okay, we've got a poster campaign going, but actually what lies behind that increase in drink driving and how might we deal with that in the future. So it's things like that that would be interesting to explore.
Sorry, layman terms, it's probably more like a SWOT analysis, isn't it, around some of these areas, because you know there's other emerging issues, particularly around driving behaviour, where some of the campaigns that we traditionally do have no impact.
I think we found that there's quite a lot to report on, particularly when you get the output, you know, the quarterly reviews that we have here, there's quite a lot to report on, so it's looking at the areas of the paragraph, interest, priority, etc. And perhaps rather than some campaigns that are being willing over the summer period.
I think road safety is one of those ones that's so large, it's hard to cover it in a meeting like this because there's just too much to talk about. So, yeah, you need to pick and choose things that are of interest to the public or the police or something, or look at an outcome that touch on everything but still not to a great extent. So it's going to be hard on something like road safety.
Well, we did touch on it previously, just about whether or not as a thematic, issues of interest to the community. This meeting, having a primary deep dive around the stuff which the public are interested in. Road safety, I'm sure, will be one of those.
So Paul, where are we now?
Is that it? You've gone through all the slides then?
Is that it?
Just by way of exception, just for management.
Fine, okay, alright, that's great. So we have Rob Parsons from the Yorkshire Post has asked for an update on some of the collaboration work. So I'll propose to provide him with that information outside of this meeting then. because I think, you know, there's lots of stuff to talk about there, so we'll do that.
Sorry, and can we just make sure we do provide the information to those 7 forces?
Yeah.
Because there's only 6 on the map. Some forgot, not from you.
Alright. Hand over to you then, is it? Yeah? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I propose to give an update on the Rural Task Force as requested in previous meetings. We launched the Rural Task Force in April 2016. It consists of 17 officers and PCSOs and staff. It's the largest of its kind in the country. It was in response to listening to our communities, partly through the National Rural Crime Network survey, and also looking at some of the feedback that we'd had with analysis that we've done within our force control room. It is a hub and spoke model. It's fully established now. We have an inspector, a sergeant, an analyst and a coordinator, and then we've got PCs and PCSOs based across the districts of North Yorkshire and the City of York, focusing on local rural issues. We've got the ability to bring those teams of officers and PCSOs together and regularly do so for proactive operations, provide a single point of contact for rural communities. We're intelligence-led. They deal with issues that are identified through predictive analysis. We've launched a rural policing strategy that focuses on prevention, intelligence, enforcement and reassurance. It's a national model, otherwise known as PEER. When we look at the prevention strand then, we've done lots of activity throughout the summer months. We have had rural crime shows. We've now got 6 in total. They'll be rolled out across the rest of the year, starting in September in a variety of locations. We're reaching out across places like Ripon Farm Services, auction marks, etc., building on what we've done over the summer months. There's a focus here on property marking, crime prevention advice, and signing up to the community messaging system. I did mean to point out at the outset that North Yorkshire Police, through the Chief Constable, are now the national leads for both rural crime and wildlife crime, and that's enabled us to reach out right across England, Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland into best practice, and we've been able to put that into being here into North Yorkshire. We've established 2 new schemes within North Yorkshire Police, Horse Watch and Heritage Watch. They've already proved really popular and numbers of members of the public have signed up to those. Horse Watch, we've used that as a vehicle in order to launch other campaigns such as increasing road safety around horses. Funding was successfully sought for a dot keying machine. That's basically a marking system. We've been able to mark a range of equipment such as tack, plant, cricket club mowers, etc. And we've held those in rural areas. Not only is it a crime prevention tool, but it's actually a really, really good way of engaging with local communities because they're coming to us actually really proactively wanting to get the property marked. We've had a number of new rural watch schemes launched. And we've reached out in numerous areas in relation to that, and we've already started to report on suspicious activity across our more isolated areas. We've been given further training to PCSOs to allow them to carry out crime prevention surveys within communities. Under the engagement arm then, our Rural Task Force colleagues have been present at numerous events up and down the county, concentrating on places where our rural communities gather. To name but a few, we attended the Great Yorkshire Show, the Wensleydale Show. We've been out to the shows within Stokesley, Ingleton, Kilnsley, Reeth, Topwith, Boroughbridge and numerous others. We've been to lots of markets and sales, looking at places like Merton, Skipton, Pateley, Leyburn, right out to Hawes, Skipton, Northampton, Helms and Pickering and many, many others as well. We've engaged in various ways now, both internally within North Yorkshire Police and externally with our partners and the communities. We launch and publish a regular newsletter. We've had external communications within the NFU magazine. We've engaged with lots of radio shows, including Radio 4, Stray FM, Minster. We've been on the Crime Watch Roadshow. We also extensively use social media, both on Twitter and Facebook. Our tweets regularly reach 5,000 plus people based on interactions. In relation to our partnership work, and we've built upon this over the summer months, we now have established working practices with the Environment Agency, and I think that's really important when we look at the feedback through the National Crime Network survey around fly tipping. We've got good relationships now with the Angling Trust, and we regularly run something called Doctraverse, which is looking at poaching on our waterways. And again, that's a national priority, so we're able to link more nationally in relation to that. We've got good relationships with the RSPB, RSPCA, Neighbourhood Watch, including the Rural Watch, the NFU, and lots of private sector companies now as well. In relation to enforcement, we've concentrated quite a lot in our organised crime groups and looking at the impact that cross-border activity has had in our rural communities. We've had lots and lots of success in this area. We've arrested lots of people for theft in rural farms, and I think that links back to what I said earlier about our reduction in what we call non-dwelling burglaries, which is basically sheds, garages and outhouses. One particular arrest involved the use of covert assets, and I guess what I'm trying to say there is that we are being absolutely ruthless in relation to criminals coming onto North Yorkshire's area, and we won't hesitate to use more intrusive techniques if the need is there. The team has made 40 plus arrests over the summer months for a range of offences, with the most recent 3 cross-border offenders located in Craven for the theft of a quad bike from the area. The arrests have caused significant disruption to rural offenders, with further protection being sought for North Yorkshire Police people and property through their regular use of bail conditions or seeking court orders, so for things like destruction of vehicles used by criminals. We use that quite regularly now. We've made a number of wildlife crime prosecutions, and again linking in with the National Wildlife Crime Unit. These have ranged from the use of trap to kill, injuring wild birds, to possessing of a badger skin, to illegal fishing on the Esk and the Swale. Additionally, we've rewritten the way that North Yorkshire Police deals with wildlife crime. We've looked at feedback from communities, individuals and agencies, and looked to deal with it in a more proactive way. Appropriate advice now must be sought right at the initial investigation and the decision-making stages to our experts within force. Recent arrests have also included the arrest of and charge of a male for a heritage crime offence, namely the theft of Yorkshire Stone in Craven, which is a developing trend nationally and is being raised as an issue in the Houses of Parliament. Yet to come then. We've got lots more planned. We're launching the special recruitment phase on the 9th of October at the Specials Conference, and we're trying to propose a similar structure for both specials and volunteers. So we are looking at the 7 special constables working alongside the current rural task force members that are based across the districts across North Yorkshire. We're aiming to have this in place by January 2017. The analyst, which started, he started about 2.5 months ago now, is on the problem profile for rural wildlife and heritage crime, so for the first time we're going to be able to really understand what the problem is here in North Yorkshire Police. It is a large piece of work, and we're hoping to have the finished product by November 2016. Heritage Watch will be rolled out with its current start in York, launch early October, so it becomes a force-wide product. And we're using the help from Historic England to identify sites within the area. The force rollout will be completed by January 2017. We're planning more Rural Watch schemes. We're linking in with our citizens and policing coordinator. She's been extremely helpful, and we're developing a template for the best practice for these schemes. And in addition, we're looking at further roles which will benefit our rural communities and looking at volunteers to come and assist us. The target date for that is April 2017. The Rural Crime Roadshows will continue throughout the rest of the year, completing in December. We've got a number of prevention workshops planned as well with equestrian centres, sports clubs and country stores, and we've got numerous dates planned for those. We've got more training planned for wildlife crime so that more and more officers are going to be trained, increasing our expertise, and we've got another 6 people planned throughout the month of September. Work's ongoing with the Rural Task Force to develop a performance framework, and we are actually trying to tackle the challenge around outcomes as well. We're looking at how we can better use niche and performance to accurately capture the work that we carry out and also the outcomes that are then achieved. We promised when we did the summit in February that we would go back to people to say this is what we've done over the summer months, what do you think? And with that in mind, we've pulled together a reference group that will incorporate internal colleagues along with significant partners such as NFU, NFU Mutual, RSPB, RSPCA, Historic England, some volunteers, etc. They're going to sit on a 6-monthly basis starting in October 2016. And I think that's going to really start to shape, you talked earlier about the Youth Parliament, what we want to do is to start to shape the services that we're giving to rural communities in a different way to what we've done before. Commissioner, that ends the presentation in relation to rural crime, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Well, thank you very much. First, I'd just like to say that, this has not been going that long and really has got off the ground really well, so well done, and a lot of work and just real enthusiasm from the team, which is just quite infectious really, so they're fantastic. I've got a couple of things. I had a look at the Rural Crime Roadshow stuff over the summer, and I did notice there was a sort of slightly eastern focus on it. So for example, the property marketing was going through BATA, and that's only sort of the Hamilton area. So I'm just saying we are getting across all of the other sort of the equivalent of BATA, the feed specialists in other parts of the county is WCF, and that if they've been engaged with. So there's a wider possibility around some of those links that might be quite helpful.
I'm happy to reassure you that I can't.
No.
But it is right across the piece.
Well, I had a look at the plan. So I'm just saying that there are other outlets that are there's a definite split across the county between the different types of outlets that you can. It's good to see that BATA has been engaged with, but it doesn't provide outlets across the whole of the county. So that's just something. The other issue that I've been engaged with quite heavily is fly tipping, particularly in the Selby area, and there's been some very significant incidents of fly tipping in the Selby area recently. Myself and the MP from Selby are going to be looking at how we can engage with the district council on that. There are some things perhaps that could be done. So, for example, some farmers have told us that they might be willing to move stuff that's been dumped on their land and take it to disposal sites, but at the moment the council will charge them for doing that. So we want to have discussions with the council to see if we can try and unblock some of these things. I think they had an incident recently where a number of tons of stuff was brought down from Glasgow and tipped and then set alight in the Selby area, which was not good. So I think the fly tipping thing is quite a difficult arena because it isn't necessarily just, it's not a policing issue. It's obviously, a lot of it is down to the local authorities, and they need to be encouraged to take action if they're not. So that's something that Nigel Adams and I are picking up in particular in that district. The second thing is that you alluded there to being a more proactive approach to wildlife crime. I mean, we have come in for some considerable criticism around some of that. So are you saying that you've responded to that?
Absolutely, I've responded to that. I mean, not only did I carry out a full review, issued a letter both to every interested party but also on social media, but then we put new things in place.
That's the bit that interesting me.
Absolutely, to make sure that doesn't happen again.
Yeah, good. That's really good to hear. Thank you very much for doing that. And finally, I've had, through a number of different feedback mechanisms, quite a lot of concern expressed to me about the vehicles that the team have access to and them not having the right type of vehicles. So no proper access to 4x4s, having to hire vehicles, and people feeling that this is significantly impacting on the way in which they can go about their business. And I suppose this is a sort of, could we have a look at that issue?
Yeah, I received a paper on that only yesterday, and that's being brought to our senior management team meeting next week. I'm convinced that we can manage fleet in a different way. So at the moment it's very team based and actually needs to be geographically based because often the vehicles are available but the way that they're issued by Fleet are quite different. Richard Flint and the Commander at York have agreed to pilot the way that we manage Fleet in a different way there, so that's why I've asked for it to come back to our senior management team next week.
Right, because I mean there's no real consistent way of accessing the right type of vehicles at the moment, and some members of the public have fed back to me that this undermines the good work that they're doing, which would be a real shame given that they've really done a lot of really good work.
I think I can reassure you that they're not stuck in the office without access to vehicles.
It's not about, I'm not saying that they're stuck in the office, I'm saying that they've got inappropriate vehicles.
Well, I think ultimately that's down to the inspector in charge of that unit to put forward a request through the chain of command, and then we'll pass it on to the head of fleet to provide the vehicle. The issue is that it was set up on the basis that the fleet turnaround is at a no-cost basis at the time, so we need to reflect that back on as we change the fleet mechanisms to provide the right level of equipment. My understanding from John as the inspector is that they've had access to 4 records.
Yes,
the consistency in how they look is probably an issue, right? Except that, we've set this team being, and then we need to reflect back as to whether or not there's anything that's having an impact on their view being by the public.
I think the feeling on it is we haven't increased the establishment overall. What we've done is we've changed the way that we police, and so therefore we don't need additional vehicles. We need to use our vehicles that we already have in a different way.
That's fine. That's fine. But at the moment, I've had quite a lot of clear communication about this. So,
well, is it useful for us to know what that is, though? Because what is it that they're saying they're not got?
I could provide that outside of this in detail if that would be helpful.
Can I just to throw something in? I know in the National Crime Network we're thinking of future. I think there's a few things we worked before this, but I think about looking at the impact of organised crime on rural communities specifically, which I think you've spoken to another chief about or something. So I might come back to speak mainly about that if that's all right, because if you're picking things up locally, it might just help steer some of the work that the NICN might do in that respect. Okay.
Absolutely, I've got in the diary for the next meeting in Warwick that I'm going to be able to telephone into, so I'll be able to pick that up then. I've got it down as an all-day event, I'm not sure if it is, but I've looked at that just this morning.
It's in the morning, it's at the NFU headquarters. Dermot Murphy, who's the RSPCA enforcement officer, is attending that meeting. He's attended it before, he's really interesting, so if you can call in, I don't know if you've spoken to Dermot in the past, he's really good. It'd be really interesting to talk about the way that they're developing their service. The last one was really, really interesting. It's worthwhile.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay, that should take us on now to an update on performance and outcomes. I intended to do this by way of a section summary if that's in line with everybody's thinking.
So on that one, Amanda, we've been, people will be aware that there's been discussions recently with the City of York around crime and antisocial behaviour in the city centre. Just by way of update, Fraser and I met with the leader of the City Council last week. And there's a proposal, having spoken with Lisa, that we take that forward at a high level to try and look at to unblock some of the issues that might have caused some of the sort of longer term consequences and try and sort of get a bit of momentum behind trying to solve some of the underlying issues around some of that. So I haven't had a chance to update Lisa since the meeting with the leader, but I will do.
Okay, in relation to a summary then as to where I think we are, as we heard earlier, MIP has the lowest crime rate per 1,000 population in England, and that's something that we're easily proud of. Crime and ASB are in line with last year, and I think we talked about this at length in the last financial year when we did start to see crime rising. We did an inordinate amount of work to look at the predictive trends for this next year, and actually we are in line with exactly what we anticipated. which is where we've seen that crime and ASB plateau out now, which is really, really good news. We monitor that in lots of detail on a monthly basis at operations board and also at individual performance conferences with commanders. The summer represented a period of increased demand for us in comparison to other times of the year, and we had operational plans in place to respond to those. And as we've already talked about, we experienced low volumes of thefts, particularly non-dwelling burglaries, and we also had reported several notable arrests in relation to those type of offences. Just to illustrate how one particular crime trend can affect our figures, and of course we don't look at binary figures, we do look at trends now, but during the month of August there was a series of caravan burglaries in Scarborough, and there was a number of burglaries where access was gained through insecure windows and doors. We do have operations in place to try and tackle burglaries through insecure properties, and actually starting to see a reduction in that area now. In relation to our killed and seriously injured casualties, the long-term trend is down and provisional figures show a reduction in KSIs. I think really importantly, and this is something that we look at in detail again at Operations Board, our satisfaction remains very high, with more than 8 in 10 victims being satisfied with our service. When we look at public confidence again, we've got 84.3% of the public confident in NYP, which is actually up 7% from 2 years ago. For public confidence, North Yorkshire Police performs really well compared to similar forces and also national averages. The next round of performance conferences, both in relation to local policing and specialist operations, are now planned in for the forthcoming quarter. Commissioner, the following slides really just highlight some of the things that I've already touched on. Victim-based crimes in line with the previous year. We've already talked about the reductions in burglary non-dwelling. We know that we've got a rise in violence without injury, but we know that already from last year that's strongly influenced in the changes in recording practices that we've looked at length over the last 12 months. Antisocial behaviour is in line with last year, and public safety is up on the last 2 years. This is linked to the recording of safeguarding and information sharing data in relation to our PSW incidents. I've already mentioned the impact of the caravan burglaries in one night in Scarborough where awnings were slashed. August showed a higher than average number of attempt burglaries. Interestingly, these were where alarms had sounded and the offender had been disturbed, so it does show that crime prevention methods are working. Other burglary themes such as insecure windows and doors is in line with the warmer months, and when we look at the impact that we had in York, we visited over 1,600 properties over the summer months, and actually 8% of those were found to have insecure doors and windows, and we were able to update the household in relation to better methods of security. The following pages I don't intend to dwell on in any detail, but what we have done is listed a number of our operations that have been running throughout the summer months. Octavian has concentrated on county-wide burglaries, particularly around the southern border of Harrogate area, around Poole Bridge, the A66 and the A1 borders in Richmondshire. We've had Operation Hawk running at Ferrops and at Checkpoint, which is concentrated on the A66 corridor as well as Thirsk and Richmond areas. Op Ambulance has been running in Castle and North Bay, and there's been multi-agency operations targeting those areas. I won't spend any time now on the Rural Crime Task Force because of course we just had an update in relation to that. Operation Hawk continues. The Roads Crime Team have arrested 9 offenders, recovered 11 vehicles and seized property up to the value of $57,500. We've made over 10 arrests, and the Rural Crime Team have made over 10 arrests during the last few months, seized vehicles and property to the value of £20,000. Of note, we've had a pursuit and arrested nominals wanted for a 2-in-1 burglary in West Yorkshire. We've had a stop of the vehicle linked to 15 make-off without payments from fuel stations following an ANPR hit. And when not committed to their primary roles, we've got a tasking process in place that makes sure our specialist operations teams are deployed across our areas, which are highlighted as hotspots. The Roads Policing Group and Firearms Support Unit were deployed to a 2-in-1 burglary in Borough Bridge. A vehicle was stopped and 4 people from Cumbria were arrested. In relation to an ANPR sighting of a stolen motor vehicle from a 2-in-1 vehicle in West Yorkshire, the vehicle was located and the pursuit followed. 5 occupants of the vehicle made off. There was an area of containment put in place and all 5 occupants were arrested. And I think this just goes back to what I was trying to highlight earlier. We've got a number of examples now of our proactive capability really coming into being over the last few months, very, very much linked to our ANPR investment. There have been 2 more checkpoint dates carried out so far, which is a multi-force operation, and there's another one planned for the 5th of October. During the 5th of October, we're going to be utilising Farm Watch and our Rural Crime Task Force as well. We do have the breakdown in relation to districts. I don't intend to dwell on those in any detail. Needless to say, we've gone through them both at Oxford, and also we'll be looking at them in more detail at the forthcoming performance conferences. Commissioner, just concentrating for a second on killed or seriously injured casualties. Provisional stats show a decrease in the previous year, as do motorcycles. And the following slides just really indicate our human resource overview. We've got a very steady period of recruitment, which means that we're working towards our establishment of 1,400 over the forthcoming months, both from transferees and new student officers. In the last month, 20 student officers and 11 transferees joined North Yorkshire Police, and we've got more planned in over the forthcoming months. We also have a recruitment campaign on PCSOs and special constables. That ends the presentation in relation to performance, and I'm happy to take any questions.
I think, Paul, you were planning to do an update on recruitment, were you, at EG at some point, so I won't ask any questions about that now, we'll deal with that.
We did have that on the agenda 2 weeks ago, but it kind of fell.
Yeah,
so
so
you just need to reschedule it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just there's a couple. One is, do you just want to explain the operations taking place in York recently around the mosaic methodology, which was linked to doing more around the fear of crime rather than actual crime?
Yeah, I can tell you one. So before we purchased a piece of software called Mosaic, which is a demographic profiling tool, which tells us where people who are perhaps more vulnerable, for example, would otherwise live. So Helen Reid's leading on that piece of work, and she's linked in with Inspector Lee Poynton from York North and Detective Inspector John Hodgson from the Economic Crime Team. So they're doing a piece of focus work on people who are particularly susceptible to vulnerability on economic crime and fraud, and doing focus work engagement along those lines. And that's really a test for North Yorkshire to start using different ways of technology, for example, mosaic keys messaging as a precursor to further roll out on this before. So it's quite an exciting development. See how it goes.
Yeah, I just think that's one that be interested to see in due course whether or not that new approach is actually quite useful. The other one that again we're talking about identifying vulnerability is the whole thing about statistics. There's coverage over the last few weeks about York University being the safest university from a crime perspective, but it has a significant challenge around suicide. And again, it's just a challenge for us whether or not we are linked back into the university in that particular area of vulnerability.
So to give you the reassurance that yes, we are, sir. So Respectable Scott, who's our leading mental health, has been linking in with Sharon Stoltz, the health for the City of York Council and other stakeholders and partners. And we have had specific meetings on this very subject with a range of partners, and I can provide you a more in-depth briefing later on this evening.
Yeah, it's also a more general thing around kind of how we feed back to the bodies that did the research around, if you've got kids at teenage, university age, you want to pick where you want to go. We've been very quite, very siloed about those areas that you'd actually look at, and you want to present a proper picture because obviously the university sector is really important for the economy locally.
There was a sort of spike of 7 cases some time back now. I know the group will be looking at the underlying issues that led to that. Let's hope such a bit of an isolated thing, but again I can report back to you on that. I think I know the City of York, for example, how in the process of recruiting somebody specifically to work on suicide prevention as well. So again, it's a right focus and to surround that.
Yeah, thank you. Just picking up on the Chief's point there about understanding some of the stats. I think there's an etiological issue here, in as much as there's a lot of stuff where we know the what. So we know from a couple of slides, North Yorkshire Police area has one of the lowest crime rates per thousand. And I think on a previous slide it came under a heading of an operational outcome. But do we know, we would know what the operational activity was that produced that, to claim it as an outcome? Do we know why confidence is up by 7% over 2? So we look for a lot of etiological connections between bad things, if you like, but in terms of good things that people who live and work here very much benefit from. I think it's as important knowing why. Particularly when, as the point was slightly tongue-in-cheek made by the Chief at the beginning, about the neighbours from where I come aren't experiencing those same things. There's very different patterns. So looking at things in terms as a region, it's understanding just why some of those things are there, as well as tracking them. Does that make sense? So I think there's reason to know as much why confidence has gone up in, or may have gone up in such an amount over 2 years, as the likelihood of becoming a victim of fraud in the force area might be an outlier as well. Does that make sense? Because that's one issue.
I think that's the whole thing about problem solving, isn't it? Yeah. Cause and effect. And I think the issue that we try and do is a very sophisticated approach to try and understand the data that we do have. There are gaps in some of that data, as we discussed previously. But I think there's an issue around not only our own sort of strategic assessments that we do in all these crime categories, but also based on individuals, but the drivers for crime as well. In danger of being political, but tough on crime, tough on the causes of crime, some of which the police have an influence on, others that have far more influence than we do. And that's why we've invested over the last few years in the partnership, in particular working well with Jenni's team and the Commissioner's Office around trying to identify what are those vulnerabilities in our community. An inordinate amount of work around mental health, where we're seeing real benefits, not only in the control room, but the likes of Bill Scott's doing tremendous work in this area, national cutting edge stuff. So I think we've started, and it's a long journey to really try and understand that question. I think the approach is a good one. There are other techniques, mosaic and various other things. Morale is the method of risk or enforcement, I think is where it comes from. That's applied both nationally and regionally and locally. I think it's fair to say that the police service has been a bit too much art and science over the last few years, and I think it's trying to turn that around. But I think the one that highlights been recently is this kind of image that York University presented in this particular light, and then within a week, I think, the solution came out, and what is the vulnerability we're trying to tackle here? Not just us, clearly. This is all about us working with our agency.
And then, if I might, one very specific issue which also relates to the responsibility that I've retained from coming from West Yorkshire, which is the National Police Air Service. I think it'd be useful to know which areas and which operations, particularly in North Yorkshire, might have benefited. I did benefit, rather than good have benefited from the NPAS, the National Police Air Services, because of course they're hosted by and run from West Yorkshire. But in terms of the West Yorkshire perspective, that's only very much about us doing and distributing. It would be useful to get an understanding of what contribution that makes locally, because it can sometimes be hidden if you're in a provisional.
That information, because I sit on the very same strategic board that you still do, that information is at granular level, isn't it? From every call to every council call. I suppose there is a conversation that needs to be had around the presentation of what information in what format we want to see on an ongoing basis. In the same way you could argue the benefits of the dogs, the dog section or the road patrol group, particular assets are used in different circumstances. But I certainly know that performance data is there. It's just when do we want to see that coming back as a kind of thematic. because I think there is something around those units that we rely on, like regional stuff that we talk about, so the scientific support and various other parts, that should be discussed at the Operational Assurance Board, and how that feeds back into here, or either the regional board that we do for the Ocean Hall. But I think it's like most things, isn't it? It's like there's a sheer volume of information out there. It's how that relates back to what the outcomes we're seeking to achieve in this meeting, because there are other meetings that discuss those topics as well.
I think it's only if there are specific operations being reported back on, to the extent that they have. If they're worthy of noting anyway, the extent to which there was a contribution made by something like that, because that's unique in as much as it's a nationally provided service. And I think where you've got a big geographical area like North Yorkshire, there's probably a greater contribution in terms of that resource than elsewhere. But that could be wrong. So again, it's just ferreting around in the information. Because again, at the national level, there's too much data, isn't there?
I think it's a genuine. I think the public of North Yorkshire would want to know those things that we contribute financially to at a national or regional level and what we're getting back. So it may well be picked up as a thematic, because we obviously do have other units that we rely on, so the insurance policy and the water search, which unfortunately we've had to use significantly over the last couple of years. There is also the NCA, what service we get from the NCA. So it might be worthwhile looking at Amanda as our kind of lead from a collaborative point of view, to perhaps come a date to be fixed. Because I think there's other national work that's happening to want us to actually be over this far more than perhaps we have in the
I don't think you can't read a good story. And it is similar to ANPR. We'll report on quantitative measures for a number of times the helicopters deployed from West Yorkshire. But sometimes case studies can be really beneficial for the impact has an investigation. And hence they look to an ANPR and use of helicopters. So case studies can also be really important for supporting the use of helicopters.
Yeah. Sort of comes on to something we discussed at the last meeting, albeit neither of you chairs were there, but it was about if the performance we look at here, quote unquote, is reflected by what the public sees performance, and we use one-on-one as an example. So I don't know if it's for you two to approve, but if we could add a slide to the performance back that comes every month that is on 101. So when ACC and Winwood last presented a virtual thematic on those things generally, which included a really helpful dashboard that had a number of calls, how quickly they're answered on average, those sorts of things, because that is something we know the public are interested in, which might start the process of trying to make this a bit more public friendly. And it might include some of those things we just talked about that they might not know about, but be interested in.
Okay. Thank you very much. Simon?
We do have one question.
Yeah.
So shall we stop the broadcast?
Yes, please. Yeah. Thanks. Okay, thank you very much. Just like to thank Gwen for her tweet. We do agree that, well, we complied with all of the various rules and things, but I think it wasn't as transparent as it could have been. And we will have a look at that in the future and see if we can make it more transparent. I think it was just a lot of information. I think in the OPCC we did put it on the homepage of the website for quite a period of time, so we will do our best to make sure it's more transparent. Okay. I think if we could just rewind slightly and go to if there's anything on the inspection activity. Maria, if that's your...
Yeah, you've got the organisation insurance calendar in your packs, which gives you detail of both HMIC inspections, external audits, internal audits, etc. As we mentioned earlier in the meeting, HMIC are with North Yorkshire this week to look at the effectiveness inspection, and we're also awaiting the documentation for legislacy and leadership. We have got the efficiency report to check for factual accuracy, so that's what it is at the moment. We're also expecting publication of rate monitoring group rate data, which is due at the beginning of October. And whereas that has been collected in previous years, this is going to be the first year when all 43 forces have been able to provide outcomes data against this particular category, and that means that better baseline benchmarking can take place. And that's due, as I said, at the beginning of October. Just in terms of some of the internal activity, we have an internal audit on collaboration activity, which Amanda looked at the scope on, so that begins at the beginning of October. And then we have some internal reviews and being undertaken at the moment on intelligence submissions, unified communications, crime audit, rape and serious sexual crime, mental health information and custody. So there's a number of internal reviews on at the moment as well.
Okay, so a question about the collaboration one. We obviously, at the moment, there's new laws going through Parliament around our duty to collaborate with the other emergency services. Will your review look at opportunities for collaboration, or will it just look at what we're already doing?
It says that the intent of the review is to look at what we've already done, so it's looking at activity that's already taken place. And that's predominantly with the Yorkshire and Humber forces, so it's particularly around
police.
Yeah.
So this is internal audit, it's
Yes,
not
I
a
understand.
piece of work that
Yeah.
I'm not doing the piece of work, internal audit doing the piece of work.
Yes, but you've defined help with the scope.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Right. So I mean, more widely, I think the opportunities for collaboration are going to be obviously there's all sorts of things that we're doing around police collaborations, which is moving forward at a pace now, I would say. But more broadly, we've looked from a tactical point of view at the sort of co-location opportunities, if you like, with the fire service and the ambulance service. But operationally, are there other things that we could be doing collaboratively that this new duty allows us to consider more proactively?
I think the answer to that is yes. I suppose the fire and rescue stuff is the one that there's been a bit more effort on because of the sort of there's a general sense that fire and rescue is probably the more obvious one to go for first because of the state of the ambulance service. But there is also work that Tim and I know Richard have been involved in the region with the ambulance service around some of the more wider issues that we need to be addressing around demand reduction collectively. Because at the moment, certainly South Yorkshire, we've got a far more effective operational linking with ambulance service around going to calls for concern. They're using the fire service to put doors in to assist if there are obese people who need lifting. There's a whole thing that the fire and rescue service are doing, the ambulance service and South Yorkshire Police that we need to learn from. But I think that's the purpose of this regional meeting, to start having these wider conversations.
Yeah, yes, it is. So we had some initial conversations about some of the practice that was Mulligan that's occurred in other areas of the region. As I said, Mr. Magic's going to chair a meeting, I think it's in November, involving senior leaders from those organisations, both locally and regionally, to try and get some movement on that as well.
So I think from an ambulance point of view, because they are organised obviously in a different way, aren't they? West Yorkshire PCC has already got a forum now, which is I think discussing specifically around how the ambulance service and he can work together. I'd like to see that replicated for North Yorkshire, so not just looking at it at a regional basis, but looking at North Yorkshire specifically and what we could do perhaps in a similar way to that Mark is doing with West Yorkshire.
I think we need to just have a conversation with Tim, because I'm not sure where he's at with that kind of conversation. There were some concerns around individual forces or individual OPCC's officers engaging the ambulance service in that way. I don't know what the answer was, but the issue seems to be more around they do cover all four of the areas.
But they can't engage with one differently than with another. You know what I mean? If that forum with West Yorkshire is already being set up, it would seem that we would want to push for something similar, really.
I suppose they may engage with those areas that they know they can deliver their performance against in a different way. We've already seen examples of where that particular service is delivering its performance because it's focusing on.
I know, but all the more reason perhaps to.
But I suppose the issue is: are they going to equally speak to us as a force? Because I think there's some benefits in actually making sure that we are getting that collective conversation. But I quite happy to have a conversation with Tim around what that looks like locally. Because obviously we have that forum already, as you know, with the fire and rescue service currently.
Yeah, and I think if we took a very sort of compliance-focused view alone of the new legislation subject to the Parliament that it comes in, we'll have to attract those opportunities for collaboration in order to discharge the new statutory duty of having looked at them and done something about it. So I think even on that basis, if we were to say, look, we need to start sitting down and looking and tracking where those opportunities may arise as we see them. Because then if we haven't done anything about them, one, it's a compliance issue internally, and two, we know almost certainly we will be inspected against that obligation and expectation. So I think it will, once that legislation gets royal assent, which it looks likely to do, then I think we move into a different arena, which is presumably the legislative purpose behind it.
Just clear, I understand the HMI is potentially going to have the ability to do inspections for the fire service. There's no suggestion they're going to do anything on the ambulance service.
No, but I think from the conversations that I've had, they'll look at obviously what we're doing. They can't hold the ambulance service to account, but they can hold us to account for not doing our best to engage and land some collaborative opportunities with the ambulance service. So I certainly, that is the distinct impression that I've got, which might not seem terribly fair, but
I think it's a bit like they can do the appropriate adult schemes. You know, they can ask the police, well, tell the police to work better with county councils to provide that sort of service, but they can't go to county council and say do better.
whereas with fire, it might be more direct. The other thing that I'm supposed to note is that the Fire and Rescue Service in North Yorkshire do currently have a first responders pilot with the ambulance service. I think it's fairly limited in scope, but they do have it already. So I think it might be worth exploring a little bit more around that.
Yes, I'll pick up on that. We've got some good links in with people in the ambulance service and North Yorkshire Fire Rescue Service, so I can certainly talk to North Yorkshire Fire Rescue Service about that.
That was a slight digression really from HMIC, wasn't it? But anyway, an internal audit. Is there anything else, Maria, that you'd like to add?
No, it's just an update.
No, okay. Forward planner then.
Continuing on the thematics that are represented through the police and crime camp for reporting purposes, but after today's meeting where we've identified that we want some additional items to come back, I've just made a note that we've looked at community safety hubs, the youth commission priorities, recruitment update, and looking at some deep dives on specific subject matters, so we'll start incorporating them into the schedule for the time.
What I'd quite like to do is just take... Maria, you do some work around this meeting, weren't you? And
at the beginning of the year, we did consider the terms of reference, but that was put on hold given the different circumstances within the organisation. But if it's time to revisit those, then perhaps...
I think it is. Yeah.
Have a look at that, yeah.
I wonder if Fraser and our team can pick that up as part of the governance review.
Yes.
Wider governance.
Yes, I'd like to myself give some thought to it as well.
It's almost like a degree B, isn't it?
E.g. Yeah, well, at first I think I need to have a think about it. I think I need to think about it. So perhaps Fraser and we could sit down and have a discussion around how we might develop this, and then perhaps take the dialogue on from there.
And they also said that we said that we review how this is set up and how it reaches out to the community and not, and whether or not that's working and whether or not it's valid for money, etc., etc. I think that needs to be picked up. And it links into our earlier conversation around some of the other organisational enablers which we want to see evidence about.
Yeah.
Only Commissioner, it might be helpful if we could an agenda for an informed discussion at EG around government, so we can just have your thoughts and then turn out a piece of work based on that. We won't start a piece of work around government and then come back and not pick up any thoughts that you achieve.
No, I mean, I just want to give it, I want to give it some thought. I want to give it some thought. Anything else? Any other business? Nope. Next meeting is the 25th of October. That's it then, for this part of the meeting. Thank you very much.